Welcome to the Troy Kearns podcast, where we talk all things real estate, business, and entrepreneurship. Today, I'm with the apartment king, Brad Sumrok. Brad Sumrok has a coaching program, which I just signed up for. He is a self-proclaimed apartment king, and I would imagine that's exactly his title. Brad, tell us about your story and how you got to where you're at today.
Yeah, well, our mutual friend, Robert Helms, came up with the name Apartment King. Actually, he said the king of apartments. And then I was trying to fit that on my license plate, King of Apartments, and it wouldn't fit on there. So I came up with APTKING, and that's how I became the Apartment King really quick. But yeah, man, so I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be owning so many units and helping so many people with apartments, because like so many people out there, I had a very traditional upbringing. My parents didn't graduate from college. So they encouraged me to graduate from college so that I could have a better life and a better job and better financial situation than they had. So I studied hard and got good grades and went to college and got a degree in engineering and saved my money. And I remember when I was 23 years old, I had a financial advisor and I'm like maxing out on my 401k and all that type of stuff. I mean, seriously, that was me. And then I was trying to climb the corporate ladder, and my boss told me I needed an MBA. And so I went and got an MBA, and the company paid for me to do that. And ultimately I left that company because what I found is you needed to move companies to move up. And I just kind of struggled though, honestly, for 14 years. I never hit my groove, and I actually was fired once and laid off once. And I was told that I didn't have what it takes, and I didn't work hard enough. I didn't come in early enough. I didn't stay late enough. Right. And it's really funny, Troy, because I don't know if I ever told you this part, but I actually started studying for my third degree, and it was the LSAT to become a lawyer.
Wow.
And I'm studying for the LSAT, and Rich Dad, Poor Dad came out in the year somewhere 2000. 2001.
Around the early 2000s. Yeah.
Yeah. And I read that book. And after reading that book, I threw away the LSAT preparatory program and I sought out specialized education, because Kiyosaki says that formal education will get you a job. And I already had 2 formal degrees. And I went through 14 years of corporate, not really hitting my groove and being fulfilled and making the money that I wanted to make, nor the impact. I'm like, why am I going to do this again for degree number 3? And I went to a real estate investing seminar 20 years ago.
This is where it starts.
Yep.
So the first time I met you or I heard you speak was in Dallas. Prior to COVID, I want to say it was 2017 or 18, and you blew, I don't have any hair, but you blew whatever hair I did have back. You came on the stage. I remember you talking about it. You said, I retired at the age of 38 years old. And you kind of said some of the same things that you said before, which is like, you know what, you felt unappreciated. You felt like you're working it. But when I read your bio today, I didn't realize that you actually started investing in real estate at quite a young age. Can you talk a little bit about how you got started and when you bought your first apartment building and what that looked like?
Yeah, well, I guess young is relative. So it wasn't until I was 35. So I don't know if you still would consider that young, because, now I look back and I have people that I'm mentoring that are in their 20s. And I'm like, oh my God, if I had started in my 20s, it's a hockey stick effect. You know what that is? It's like sometimes you could put in a lot of effort and you don't see the fruits of your labor, because there's a lot of seed planting and learning curving that's going on. But now we're growing exponentially, and we have been the last few years. So yeah, I'll never forget it. I was 35 when I went to that seminar, and I mentioned that was 20 years ago. So you could guess how old I am now. And that's right. I'll be 55 in May.
Yeah, I'm not a math genius, but it sounded like 55.
Yeah.
Good.
So thank you. So, and thank you for not saying for your age either. I appreciate that.
Look good. No, and I want to tell you something real quick off topic. So when I said Brad mentored me before, he didn't know this, but when somebody says something, whether it's at an event, whether it's in a book that really captivates your attention, and I may have mentioned this to you off the podcast, but when you first piqued my attention was in Dallas. I went to the Rich Guys or the Real Estate Guys podcast show in Dallas. And I was like, this guy, Brad Sumrok, number one, has a really cool name. Number two, like knows his stuff. I always find that engineers in real estate are like a deadly combination. So I really resonated with the fact that you figured it out and really struggled and got ahead. So I started following you on social media before I even went into social media, and I followed your yoga journey. And I was, not only impressed with the fact that you're the apartment king, but you've transformed your whole body and mindset through yoga. And I did want to take a little bit of time just to talk about the fact that the reason we're doing this podcast today is I just am spending, if you're okay with me saying the numbers, I know they're about ready to go up, but I'm about ready to spend $31,000 investing in someone that you could argue, and this has been a 5-year sales cycle in my mind, but really I made the decision the day I met you in Dallas that I wanted to coach with you some way, shape, or how. And the reason for that is you've helped students buy over $4 billion worth of real estate. You've bought, I think, over 8,000 units in your lifetime. And the stuff that you're doing, even in the last 5 years since I first talked to you, is completely different than what it was 5 years ago. So can you talk about like what has changed? And I know you're a big Tony Robbins guy. I know you're a big coaching guy. You're always into self-improvement. What does Brad Sumrok's life look like?
Yeah, that's like, this is the topic that lights me up probably more than even apartments, right? Because I mean, look, I believe we have one shot at life. Now maybe we have another form of life, and it's about, maximizing what we're doing here. So one is the impact we can make, and we can't make an impact. Number one, you can't make an impact if you're broke. You really can't. Show me one person that has been broke. I mean, maybe, you could say, oh, Mother Teresa, well, she didn't have any money. Well, yeah, she was able to raise a lot of money and get a lot of donations, right?
Right.
So without money, it's hard to make a big impact for yourself, for your family, for your loved ones, for your generations to come, and for the community and for strangers. But number two, even more importantly, you can't impact anything if you're not healthy. And number three, if you're in a relationship, a marriage, a significant other, and that relationship is just full of challenges and drama and not supportive and loving and synergistic, then it's hard to focus on business too and making an impact. So like the three things that really, really light me up are lifting. Well, the one thing that lights me up is lifting people up any way I can. And sometimes for most people professionally, it's through transferring my ability to help people do what I did with apartments. And we turned that into a business, as you know, and you're coming into that mentorship program, just like hundreds and hundreds of others. But here's the deal. Turning 55, most people say I don't look 55, act 55. And I started doing yoga about 3 years ago, and it changed my life. I practice yoga probably 100 to 150 days a year. So just say every second or third day, I'm taking a yoga class. And what yoga has done for me is not only improved my physical body, it's made me more flexible. And another way to describe flexible is it works the muscles that you can't move in different directions, and balance and coordination, but also it's given me more presence.
Right.
Because I have one of those achiever mindsets where I'm always thinking about what's next.
Right.
And a lot of successful people are like that. Like my mentors, Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone, they're always thinking about what's next. And you don't see them a lot of times just being present. But when I'm doing yoga, not only is it, burning calories and improving my mobility and all that type of stuff, but it's allowing me to be more present. And what that does is, when I'm done with yoga, I'm in a different mental state, and I have the capacity to make better and more clearer decisions about my future. And that's very powerful.
That's super powerful. And the decisions that you're making are monumental decisions. And I'd like to talk about one real quick. So you just were mentioning in the last conference that I was at in Dallas just a couple of weeks ago that you just bought a property in Florida. I don't remember exactly where it was, but you're talking about how your plan was to hold it for a couple of years, and it's already done so well that you guys are going to refinance or sell it or do something like that. And you're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars of transaction. I mean, do you need to be focused for something like that, or could you kind of just fake it?
Well, you really have to be focused. And, just like the last month, I spent 6 days with Tony Robbins and 6 billionaires. Then I went to Mexico on a charity trip, got back, literally was in my Dallas residence for less than 24 hours, went to another mastermind. By the way, if you think my program for 31 grand is expensive, it's 2 years of mentoring, as you know, but I'm in this group where I pay $100,000.
I don't think it's expensive. I think it's worth every penny.
I just came back from a mastermind. Me and my wife both pay $100,000 per year.
Wow.
For a mastermind. Okay. And in the meantime, with all that travel, I refinanced my house. I made 2 offers on $50 million deals. Maybe one is going to be awarded today and may come to us. I made that offer. I was on interviewing with the sellers to get selected. I'm refinancing the deal in Florida that I mentioned. I just did a live training event last night. I don't know if you were on it, with 1,500 people registered on how to beat inflation with real estate. And I flew my team to Florida to make it look really nice. So rather than just talking into Zoom, we had a professional cameras and lighting and sound and all that stuff. And they just left. So like, it's really important to have like the mental capacity to move and pivot from one task to another. And before this call, I was on the phone with a lender filling out refinance stuff. And I literally had 7 minutes from that call to get ready to jump on the Zoom.
Right.
And so, what I find is having the physical stamina and having the mental clarity. There's so many people that are just going along to get along, and they have brain fog and they don't know what's coming next, and they're not anticipating their next move. And they're like, every day before I go to bed, I think about my next day. And by the way, I think I told you when I saw you earlier this month in Dallas, I just completed 75 hard.
That's so right.
From January 3rd to March 18th, I did 75 days, 2 workouts a day, no sugar, no alcohol, no carbs, no desserts, and literally got arguably could be the best shape of my life.
Yeah, I saw you post your picture. You look pretty ripped, dude. Especially, like I said, I would never guess you're 55. That doesn't even enter the atmosphere when I'm talking to you. That's crazy. So how did that work out for you?
I love it. Absolutely outstanding. I'd say 65 days were not hard. There were 10 that really sucked. There were 10 that are like, why am I doing this? I'm getting 4 hours of sleep. I'm in Mexico doing charity work. They're taking us out to the local soccer game in Guadalajara, and I'm getting back at midnight, and we got the Rotary Club picking us up at 7 a.m. the next morning, and I got to get my workout in.
Every reason not to do it, and you're doing it. That's great. Speaking of that, and I think this is important to note. So most of the people who listen to this show are, quite a bit younger than us. They're getting started in their real estate journey. You have really built a significant portfolio. More important than that, I think to people listening, you've helped thousands of people build portfolios, whether personally or watching you online and taking some of the stuff that you do, or whether you're coaching them in one of the many seminars that you're a part of. Can you talk a little bit about what someone could learn in your program and what it's all about and what it is for people? Like, I know if you're out there listening right now, the whole word apartment scares the crap out of most people because it's a big purchase. How do you break it down so it's not so scary for somebody listening?
Well, look, if let's say you have $50,000 to invest, you could put that, well, number one, I'm just even in real estate, but you could just blindly put it in the stock market and pray it goes up. That's not a good strategy. With 50,000, you might be able to buy a couple of single family rentals. You might be able to buy a duplex, maybe. But when you buy those single family rentals or a duplex, you're going to be doing all the work yourself. You're going to be putting more money down on a percentage of LTV. You have no economies of scale for property management. You're the property manager. You're the bookkeeper. You're meeting the tenant. You're signing the leases. You're the one the tenant calls. You're the one the prospects call when you put the for rent sign in the yard. You're the one that has to go and inspect the make ready when the tenant moves out. You're the one that goes to court if the tenant doesn't pay the rent. So there's no leverage. In Robert Kiyosaki's terms, you are an S and you just bought yourself a job. Okay. Right. So why would anybody want to do that? Because they don't know what's available. And what is available for that same 50,000 is 2 options. One is, rather than putting it in the stock market passively and praying, is that you could put it in passively with a syndication, and you could share in the benefits of better returns, better non-recourse financing, professional management. And the beauty of the passive investor is they don't have to do any of the work. But now here's the secret, Troy. The secret is if you want to be like the guy that talks about 10xing his money that everybody knows, Grant Cardone,
right?
You have to be on the passive investors are not 10xing their money. The people 10xing their money are the people putting the deals together. And so for that same 50,000 that might get you a very small percentage as a limited partner, i.e. a passive investor, why not take that same 50,000, but be on the other side and put the deal together? And that's what I train people to do, because that's what I do. By people coming into my program, my outcome for them, and Troy, I don't want to say what my outcome for you is. My number one outcome for you is to support you in your outcomes. But here's the deal.
Right.
You should be able to buy a 100-unit deal within 6 to 12 months. Anybody can. You only need to put 50,000. Like here, the math on a 100-unit deal is really simple. 100 units is 10 million, roughly. You need 3 million down, a $7 million loan. You'd say, where do I get the 3 million? Well, you put up 50 and then you raise the 2.95 from other people and you go to industry events. You go to the events that I put on. You're joining my ecosystem, not just for mentorship, but you're going to meet 1,400 other people in my ecosystem that all want to invest. So you're going to raise money from them. You're going to go to other events like we met at the real estate guys. Raising money is not challenging unless you just put your head in the sand.
Brad, you're saying basically that money is the easiest part of the deal and that the deal is probably the hardest part of the deal.
Well, yes and no. And I just need to level with everybody here. If you're completely introverted and you're not able to communicate well, and look, there are people in that category that are super smart, maybe super analytical, maybe super left brain. Their strong suit is not influencing and sharing opportunities. Well, see, that's the kind of person that should partner with the extrovert. So like what you'll see, Troy, is that say on that $10 million deal, there might be 2 or 3 people that'll be co-GPs. They will co-general partner a deal. And one of them might be like the extroverted capital raiser that loves going to networking events. One of them might be the number cruncher that loves underwriting the deals, right?
For someone who doesn't know what a GP is and an LP is, can you break that down for just the neophyte, the guy who's never even heard those terms?
Yeah, the definition of LP is limited partner, and a synonym is passive investor. So an LP is somebody that just puts money into somebody else's deal, and they get a pro rata percentage of ownership, which equals a pro rata percentage of cash flow and a pro rata percentage of sales proceeds and a pro rata percentage of depreciation. A GP stands for general partner. And the thing is there could be more than one GP. So like in my deals, it's usually like me and maybe 1 or 2 other people. So the GP team is it's either one person or a small group of people, and they're the ones that are responsible for all of the active roles. And the active roles are finding the deals, underwriting the deals, getting debt quotes for the deals, and arranging the debt and the financing, raising the equity. That's a role from the GP team, managing the deal once it's closed, sending out investor reports. So just think of the GP team or the active team members that are making the deal happen, from the acquisition to the underwriting to the debt to the equity to the post-closing, including the rehab and the asset management. That's all done by the GP team. Whereas the LPs, the passive investors, they just need to be educated and they need to be in a community where there's a lot of GPs. Is that a good explanation?
I think it's really good the way you said it. Just when I first was even hearing you speak 5 years ago as a guy who's invested a lot by myself, right? I think that the best way to break it down for people is when you're doing a apartment syndication deal, which is basically what Brad's talking about. Most of these apartments that anybody owns these days are owned by multiple people. It's not one guy. It's either a fund or a smaller fund, right? And what you're basically boiling down is a fund, right? You're building a fund that is full of limited partners that are passive investors and general partners that are active investors.
Yeah, and there's a difference in maybe terminology. So there's one type of fund, let's say let's say I form a fund right now and I could just be raising money and I don't even know what I'm going to buy. And so that's one type of fund. And maybe people that invest in that fund, I might go out and buy 5 or 6 deals with that fund. So that is one type of fund. But another type of fund is a very specific fund. So it's I find a property and raise the money. And so those are the two different types of funds. But in the big picture, they're both funds. But one is I found a deal and I raised the money. And so, essentially I put together a fund to buy one deal. And the other way is I put together what's called a blind fund, because it's blind because we don't know what I'm going to buy yet, right? But I might say, like, I know people doing this, Troy. It's like, hey, I'm going to raise $50 million and buy 5 deals in Tampa and Jacksonville. And these deals are all going to be 200 units or more. And we're looking for deals that have X type of return. And that could be the fund that I'm raising money for. Or it could be, hey, I found this 276 unit property in Nashville. Here's the exact address, the underwriting, the projected returns, and now let's do a raise for the money.
Right. Which is more common for you?
The second way, find a deal, raise the money.
Is it easier for people to conceptualize the second versus the later? Is it easy for people to say, hey, you know what? That's the apartment building we're talking about right here. This is the amount of money we need versus like, hey, we're going to be buying all these types of things.
Yes, it is easier.
Okay, great. So your first apartment building, what was it? Can you talk a little bit about that deal?
Yeah, man, I can remember it like it was yesterday. And I thought it was a really big deal at the time. And it was it wasn't just my first apartment, Troy. It was my first investment property ever. And it wasn't a single family rental. It wasn't a duplex. It wasn't a 4-plex. It wasn't an 8-plex. See, I went to that real estate investing seminar and I bought their mentorship program, kind of like you're investing in mine.
Massive action.
Yeah. And the guy told me, Brad, buy as many doors as you can under one roof, metaphorically, like in one complex.
Right.
And at the time, back in 2002, syndication was not, his cup of tea at the time.
Right.
And so he wasn't encouraging us to syndicate. It was like, take your liquidity and buy as many doors as you can. So I had 200,000 saved from 14 years of corporate America. Now, for a lot of people, that sounds like a lot of money.
Right.
But imagine going to work for somebody else for 14 years, going in at 8, coming home at 5, making companies rich as stink. And you were able to save, you were able to pay your bills, buy a car, maybe buy a house, maybe take 2 weeks vacation. Right. And then save up $200,000 over 14 freaking years. Are you kidding me? Now I look what I make, and we're making that kind of 200,000 in a week. Seriously,
it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. So the first apartment building, you had $200,000, Brad. It's your brand new deal. You're an engineer. You're frustrated with your job right now. So I'm sure you're nervous a little bit about this first deal. You have to be.
Hell yeah. I mean, look, and here's the other thing. I'm nervous about every deal I do. If you're not nervous, there got to be almost something wrong. It's like, I just came back from listening to 6 billionaires, and you know what they wanted? 2 or 3 of them said the same thing. They said, if you're worried right now, you probably don't have much to worry about, because the people that are worried are double checking and triple checking their checklists and assumptions. And the people that aren't worried are probably the ones that need to worry because they're overconfident. And so the first deal, it was $1 million. I put 200 down, got an $800,000 loan. It was full recourse.
How many units?
32 units. I still had a job. So I'm like, how am I going to manage it? Well, I learned how. How am I going to do the books? Well, I learned how. But essentially, I bought myself a job.
How much did that job pay?
Well, it paid pretty good. I will tell you, it put that building put between $4,000 and $5,000 a month into my pocket. And here's the other thing. If you're thinking about interest rates, see, I paid $30,000 a unit for that property. And now people are like, oh my God, now you pay $100,000 a unit. How do you make any money? But here's what the missing link is. 20 years ago, you know what my interest rate was? 6.3%.
Yep.
20 years ago, do you know what the rents were? $400 a month. Wow. So I paid $30,000 a unit for $400 a month times 32 units. And my rate of debt, my cost of capital was 6.3%. Now I'm buying properties for $100,000 a unit, but I'm getting 3% interest rates, maybe 4 now, but still lower than 6. And rents are $1,200 a month. So you do the math and the numbers still work.
Yeah. And I think that's probably the thing that helps you better than anybody that I've ever met. And, I have a friend of mine who's just turned 30, and he reminds me of a lot of you. He's a mechanical engineer that jumped at 25 years into real estate and has just blown everybody away. And that's probably one of the core reasons that I am really attracted to you and your teaching style, is that engineers always start with the end in mind. And I think the way that you're programmed is such that you always start with the end in mind. And I'm more of a jump in and figure it out. So I've been doing apartments, I've been doing all these other things. But when I watch the way you're scaling and the way you're doing things, it's like, geez Louise, how do you keep up with that train? And so I figured I better hook myself to the caboose and get going with you. So can we talk a little bit about like how you transitioned from a 31 unit apartment building to how many units do I even dare you ask own today?
Yeah. Well, here's the deal. Let me take you through the journey of my first 3 deals.
Okay, perfect.
I already talked about the first one. The second one was the same model. Take as much money as you have and buy as many doors as you can. And so I put 200 down and bought 32 units. I didn't have any more money, but then that year I was in sales and I got a commission check. I'm not bragging, but I got a $190,000 commission check, biggest commission check in my life. And I took that money and I bought another 30 units. I did. I bought another 30 units, and I was playing Monopoly, Troy. If you have Park Place and the boardwalk, right? They're right next to each other, and you could charge more rent, right? So I had 32 units, and I knew I needed more units nearby so I could hire one manager and one maintenance person to cover both properties. And that's when I started learning about economies of scale. And so the second property was a half a mile from the first one. And my manager would go to each property, a couple hours a day. And so would the maintenance guy. So now instead of having like a part-time manager, a part-time maintenance guy on 32 units, I have a full-time manager and a full-time maintenance person. So I'm able to get a higher caliber employee. And now I start doing less work. I'm starting to figure out scale. My third property, I had no money left. Somebody brought me a 250 unit property. And that's when I learned how to syndicate. I raised $1.9 million from other people that I met at various real estate events. They knew I had 2 properties that I already owned. And from them getting to know me, these properties were doing really well. And so they would always tell me, hey, Brad, if you find another deal, I want to invest with you. So then I found 250 units. And here's the thing, my mind wanted to say no, because I'm like, well, I don't think, how am I going to do this? I don't have much money to put in. Is anyone going to invest with me?
Right.
I've never done this before. But see, this is why I challenge myself and go to Tony Robbins and Grant Cardone and stuff. I don't go to these people to learn real estate. I go to these people because their mindsets, and they still are, by the way, that's why I still go to these masterminds and events and go to Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins. I don't go to learn apartments from Grant Cardone. I go to learn how he thinks, because the guy thinks big. Back then, I almost said no to that 250 unit deal, but I said yes. There was something inside of me that said yes. And I raised the money and closed the deal. And that just set me on a trajectory. And that's when I quit my job. I didn't quit my job when I had the 62 units. I quit my job when I was able to scale and go bigger.
Wow. Well, that's Brad, that's amazing. So do you own any of these properties still?
No, these I bought, more than 15 years ago.
That's important to mention, because real estate, you make money in real estate by turning money, just like anything else. Stagnant money doesn't tend to grow you money. And as you're growing and learning economies of scale, I'm sure that you're not buying 31 unit apartment buildings anymore.
No, I'm not.
What are you teaching your students to buy today? And what are you yourself buying today?
Well, here's what I teach. You got to do 60 units and up. And sometimes when people listen to that, they're like, well, wow, I don't have any experience, Brad. Like, shouldn't I start smaller? And I'm like, no, because you want to begin with the end in mind. If you want to buy a deal and get non-recourse financing with 75% leverage, non-recourse financing, and professional management, you need to do 60 units and up. Okay. And most of my students that come in, Troy, you're going to find this out.
I'm looking forward to it.
You are going to be coached and mentored to not look at anything under 60 units. Okay. And we have hundreds of success stories. Now, what am I doing? Okay. I bought a deal 4 months ago for only 88 units. I bought a deal 5 months ago that was over 1,000 units. So my sweet spot is 200 units plus. But if I see an 80, 90, 100 unit deal out there that fits into the markets that I like, and maybe it's close by to another property that I already own, I'm going to pick it up.